those of you tuning in at home, I can see your questions now. So ask away. And if I'm saying anything that is like out of order, let me know. I mean, I've studied this before, read things, but you know, there's always something. I'm not a perfect human being, so I know. Despite what Kelly thinks. Yeah. Really interesting topic, this one. And I try to be as true to it as possible. So we're learning about Islam. Islam means what? Does anybody know? The word Islam, not peace. It's kind of related, like the word salam, right? Shalom, kind of in there, but not exact. Submit. So, we're at 11:05. We good to go? Ready for this? So we start off with the history of Islam. You need some paper, Gerard? You got it. Okay. Everyone have a copy of these things? Yep. You don't? He does. You don't? What? All right. Well, you've got one. Okay. All right. So, start with the history of Islam. So Mohammed was born 570 AD. So that's more than 500 years after Jesus' death and resurrection. Okay? So 500 AD. So what else is happening in the church? 570 AD. We've already had the early church growing and spreading. You read the book of Acts. You already have the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD, where all the Jewish people scattered throughout the known world. You have persecution under the Roman Empire for the Christians. And you have the 7 churches growing that John references in Revelation. We may talk about that later. And you've already had in 325-ish the first Lateran Council. Right? This is just after Constantine takes over the Roman Empire and he allows Christianity to exist. Was he a Christian, Constantine? That's up for debate. Did he have Christian influences? Yes. He was influenced by Christianity. Was he? That's a whole other Bible study, I think. That's 320. I think he came to power 323. They have the council in 325, Council of Nicaea, which is a Greek-speaking territory. And then you have another council, 384, of Constantinople, city named after who? Constantine. Hey, look at that. Right on time. So the city named after Constantine. So Constantine tried to start kind of a new Rome. As he saw Rome, it was very corrupt. And so he tried to start a new center for power in Constantinople. Now, Constantinople, I don't know if you have that song in your head, you're of that generation, but it's at the very, very bottom edge of Turkey, where, what's the waterway there? Straits or something? Huh? Well, there's a waterway that runs right next to Turkey there, and it has access to all of these countries. And so if you control that narrow passageway of water, then you control what goes in and out for a lot of countries. So Constantinople was right in that area. Yeah, it's in that area. So I know, Joe. If I made handouts and attachment, I should do that. I know. I'll get you the handout, Joe. Sorry. Goes asking for it. But anyhow, sorry. So leading up to the birth of Muhammad, so you had Constantinople, you had the council in Constantinople. The next council's 420s? Something like this. So Chad is nodding. So we've already had, I think by this time there was like 4 church councils, big ones, that are dealing with the topic of who is Jesus? What are his natures? Is he human? Is he divine? Is he both? What percentage of both is he? You also have talks in the church about what's the work of the Holy Spirit in all of this. So there's the church is figuring itself out, what their identity is, and God's word, and what is the Bible, and things like that. So Christianity is beginning to spread. Judaism was still already in the area where Muhammad was, in the Arabian Peninsula. So this is where he's born. His dad was born, or his dad died before he was born, and then his mother died when he was real little, like 3 years old or something. Raised by his grandfather. Marries a merchant lady leading her caravan, and then she dies, so he takes over the caravan. So he becomes kind of a merchant. So point B there, he became a traveling merchant, possibly gathering different religious beliefs along his life. He lives in the Arabian area. In 610 A.D., he received his first revelation from what he believed was the angel Gabriel. And he begins preaching his new beliefs. So his wife was still alive at the time, and he married a lot of people. So I guess one of his first wife was alive at the time, and he goes to this cave to meditate and receives this revelation from what he believes is the angel Gabriel, and he goes to his wife and his friends, and he starts to talk to them about it. They're like, "This is amazing. You received something from God. You should run with it." So he does. And he starts to gather people under him. Now, he at the time is the city of Mecca, right? Mecca is the Mecca. That's where we get the phrase, right? Mecca of Islam. Mecca is this big city, and in the middle of this city, I don't know if it's in the middle, I should say that, but an important hub in this city is this cabal. It's a cube that covers this thing that people believe fell from heaven, a meteorite, whatever, I don't know. So it covers this thing that's, has all these, at the time of Muhammad, has all these beliefs that, different beliefs about what this thing is. So that place where people walk in that gigantic circle around that cube was already going on in Abraham's time. And as he gathers his followers, the people of the city say, they start to have problems with Muhammad. And so, in 622 A.D., he and his followers leave Mecca under persecution to make a home in modern-day Medina. They call it the Hijrah flight. And it's considered the first year of the Muslim calendar, year 1. Year 0, I guess we would call it that. Now, they would eventually take over Medina by the sword, and there was a lot of plotting and planning on Muhammad's part to do that. He used political weaknesses of people against each other. He would instigate fights people didn't want to necessarily have, but he pushed, until eventually he and his followers took over the city of Medina. And those who would not convert, particularly Jews in their different areas of Medina, they were outright killed if they didn't run away and flee. So, pretty bloody start to begin with, 622. 624, Muhammad provokes war with Mecca, leads an attack, multiple attacks actually. And they don't want to fight him. They don't want to mess with Muhammad. Just leave us alone, we'll leave you alone. He keeps picking fights. Eventually, that leads to an all-out war and battle. And by 630 A.D., he captures the city by sword. He takes it over. In 632, Muhammad then dies. So born 570, dies 632. He's 62 years old. Now, Muhammad had no male heir. He had a bunch of daughters. He didn't have any boys. No male heir, and he didn't name anybody else successor. He did have a guy with him. Spell check. Changed that. Anyway, he did have a guy that would lead prayers on his behalf while he was alive. Abu Bakr, B-A-K-R. Oh, no, it's two words together. Abu Bakr took the mantle. He died 2 years after Muhammad. So this guy, Abu Bakr, takes up the leadership of Islam for 2 years, and he died. The next three caliphs, that is those who would succeed Muhammad, were assassinated by fellow Muslims. So, not a pretty start in Islam either. During the 100 years after Muhammad died, Islam attacked and conquered as far east as the edge of China into western China and western India, the east. They also conquered across the top of Africa and over into Spain, the west. They remained in Spain for 800 years. 800 years. Now, we've all heard of the thing you'll never expect. Spanish Inquisition, right? Spanish Inquisition was part of this purge to get the Muslims out of Spain. Right? So they'd been there already for 800 years. They captured, and there was this purge, right? So this is all having an impact. Islam and it's going across Africa and into Spain has an impact on things for years to come. Any questions on anything so far? Sure. Yeah, Islam is the religion. Muslim is the follower. So you are a Christian within Christianity. Someone is a Muslim within Islam. So the Muslim is the name of the follower, one who submits. And Islam is the religion overall. So in the 1200s, Muslim countries thrived on Greek and Persian ideas. There was kind of this Muslim renaissance where you had philosophers and mathematicians and a lot of interesting ideas coming out of Muslim countries. I think they had electricity pretty early on. They had these clay jars where they had batteries. You know, you had the acid and whatever and generated electricity. They had street lamps pretty early on. Pretty fascinating stuff. They had libraries, so I've heard that. Yeah, I mean, even Muslims preserved literature from different religions and things like that. And there's a spectrum of Muslims. Well, we'll get to that too. So in some cases, there are some that are more, I guess, I don't know how you would put it, more lenient across the board for things, and then some are very strict. Intolerant is also a thing, yeah. But yeah, I guess you have that with everybody in some respects. In 1492, the Muslims were expelled from Spain. In 1453, Muslims captured Constantinople, renamed it Istanbul. There it is. This is in modern-day Turkey. So, the Greek Orthodox Church, or the Eastern Orthodox Church, had its head in Constantinople. Would you say that's right, David? Okay. And so you had the patriarch, which is, you could call him the Pope of the Eastern Church. It's not the same. But the patriarch had his position there, and he wrote to Rome. He said, help us. We need help. Because they were the point of protection into Europe. And Rome did not send any help. So Constantinople fell, was taken over, and so Turkey was then taken over. The 7 churches that I mentioned earlier, where are they now? They're not there. 7 churches in Revelation are gone. And so, that region in Turkey is considered Muslim territory. And it wasn't until, that was the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire was there. The Ottoman Caliphate, Caliphate, however you want to pronounce it. And then modern day Turkey, like the I don't remember, it was the 1950s or something, said, okay, the Ottoman Caliphate's gone. Which is weird to just turn it off. But they just said, nope, it's not here anymore. And this is where you get some interesting stuff from ISIS and things today, because they're trying to reinstate this caliphate that would oversee all of the Muslim country. You'd have one caliph, Alif. Yeah, it's in their case, they're very extreme about, getting countries in line. So, we'll get to that. Sure, they're not trying to get the caliph to be just some kind of president or be elected or anything like that. In fact, they had somebody until semi-recently that they had lifted up, but didn't go anywhere. So they're trying to get the old system back, and they'll do that in whatever way they feel necessary. Because for them, it's a theocracy. Their countries are ruled by religion and the laws of their religion, as well as politicians. Now, how strict are they on those laws? It depends on the country. Yeah, he's not just Pope. If you want to look at him, a spiritual head, but he's also political head in one, both and. And all other leaders would have to kind of submit to his rule. There's a point. I lost it. It was amazing, though. Really good. Any questions on the history? This is why you have Muslims across, all in Africa, especially Ethiopia, a big area, northern Africa, and in China right now, it's kind of a big deal, right? The Uyghur Muslims, Uigher, they are put in camps. They're being treated terribly right now by the Chinese government. You read some of the things that are happening, it's heart-wrenching. But the Chinese government is allowed to do what they're doing. Here. China's trying to do what? Say that again? They're not trying to push them out. They're just putting them in camps, enslaving them, manipulating them, using them for slave work, slave labor. And from what I hear, and I have to validate, but companies like Nike purchase things that are made from the slaves in China. Modern day, this is happening right now. Present tense. It's unthinkable. But plenty of people are willing to turn a blind eye because they don't want to upset China. So that's why you see the connections there. This is old. This goes back centuries. Pastor Wood is a pastor when he's in Indonesia as a pastor, right? And what's the largest religion in Indonesia? Islam. And do you remember what he said? What size country Indonesia is in the world? Like fourth or fifth, something like that. I mean, huge. It's the fourth largest country in the world, Indonesia. In population size, right? That's huge. It's a lot of people. And so, Islam is, from a little place in Arabia in the 600s, just absolutely expanded all over the world. Any questions or thoughts? Yeah, they have, they're not called churches. They call their building a mosque, right? Yeah. That's tough. Because we'll talk about it, but Islam isn't just like a thing on the side. It is a core part of somebody's life, Muslim's life, right? So what they teach and believe is a part of everything that they do, including diet. Like Judaism, they have some dietary laws. So does Islam. You shouldn't drink Islam, alcohol. So they smoke a lot of stuff. So, they have things that are different. But it's a part of their life, everyday life, Islam. So what are the religious texts of Islam? What's the big one? Yeah, so the Quran, right? What did you say, Neil? Yeah. So you know a little bit about this. Correct me if I'm wrong in anything. I'm fine with that. Okay. Can you tell us about the Hadith? Hadith, yeah. Yeah, we get to that. So you're on my second point there. I got A is the Quran and B is Hadith, which means discourse. Yeah, it's their commentary on the Quran, but it's more than that. It's not just a commentary, but it's their laws, right? These are their laws. The Talmud, yeah. I'm more than that, though, I would think, because I think the Talmud isn't trying to create laws. It's just trying to explain what's in the text, whereas the Hadith is actually saying, you do this, this is how you live. So it would be considered almost as holy as the Quran in terms of this is how you live your life. Because the Quran doesn't necessarily have, like, here's everything you have to do from, sun up to sun down, whereas the Hadith will have all those things. So the Quran means recitation. They're considered revelations to Muhammad from Allah from 610 to 632 when he died. 22 years, these revelations where people listened to him, and they wrote these things down. It's composed of 114 surahs, chapters, and they're arranged from longest to shortest, which can be confusing to we who read Scripture because we tend to look at the Bible as chronological, right? From the beginning to the end. But they don't set it up that way. They have longest to shortest. which doesn't necessarily mean it's chronological. Now, it could be, as some people say, that the shortest are when Muhammad started everything, and then longer is when he almost died. So as he starts to develop the teachings and beliefs and the things, kind of grew, he spoke more, right? So there's some. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that's the case across the board. It's I don't know which of the 114 are dated when. No, I'm not an expert on that. Yeah, it's Adam Francisco who wrote, put this thing together, One God, Many Gods, where I got some, actually I didn't get a whole lot out of this. In what I put here, I mean, there's some good stuff in here. I didn't use it with these sheets that I have here. But Adam Francisco got his degree in, remember, he can read Arabic and all that really well. He's done a lot of work with Muslims. And he says it's pretty tough because you can pull out one thing from the Quran that says peace, 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 and another thing from the Quran that says fight, fight, fight. And you can make an argument for both. Now, I think the general hermeneutic, the general understanding of how to see what gets priority is to see what came later, because what comes later kind of supersedes what came before. Right. Well, I've got a few verses in here we could talk about. It just makes me wonder, So anyhow, we'll get to that. So the Quran has 114 chapters, if you want to put it in English. They're arranged from longest to shortest. Muhammad's first successor, this is really interesting, Abu Bakr, compiled the writings that he felt were the best, the more faithful to what Muhammad said, and he had the rest destroyed to create one text. So there were other writings out there quoting what Muhammad said, but they're lost forever. And so if you ask a Muslim, they look at the Bible and they say, it's completely unreliable. You have all of these different writings, copies of the Bible that go down, down, down that conflict with one another. So how can you have a text that's reliable? And we talked about that, about a month or so ago. The reliability of not only the New Testament, but the Bible as a historical document. They reject that. And they say, we have one text that doesn't change throughout. You shouldn't read it in English, because that's a translation of the real true text. In order to understand it, you got to read it in its original language. Everything else is not really good enough. And when you learn that they actually had other texts that were dismissed, you start to wonder what those said. I don't know. Then you have the Hadith, which means, like I said, discourse. And I wrote supposedly, I know I shouldn't write that, but supposedly passed down verbally and then written down hundreds of years after Muhammad. So in the 8th century and the 9th century, they were finally written down. But they were passed down orally since the 600s to the 700s, 800s. So you wonder, did anything get changed along the way? I mean, the New Testament, we have Paul's letters that go back, some people say, 50 A.D. 20 years after Jesus died and rose. That's long enough for people to read it and say, that's not what happened. You don't get that. And here you've got a span of 100, 200 years when these things are finally written down. Who's to know whether or not that was what was there to begin with? So it's a little fishy, to have that. It's tough to have that. But there was always these struggles for leadership, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And so with these struggles for leadership and assassinations and infighting, someone who is in charge is going to say, I assume human nature, this is the way I expect Islam to be, to live. Write this down. Let's codify it. Let's make it the thing. I'd have to talk to a Muslim to see what they say about that. But anyway, the Hadith, this is the backbone of Muslim law. This is all the things that they live out on a day-to-day basis. Any questions so far? Yeah. Yeah. Now, we get accused of that in our scriptures too, right? How can it be that 2,000 years, Yeah. Now, they, from what I understand, both of them, so he said that there could be two hadiths because you've got Sunnis and Shiite Muslims. There's two different types of Muslim. And I've got that later in part 4 of this. But from what I understand, they both generally use the same one. I could be wrong. I'd have to do some work. But from my reading of books and things, putting this together, one of the books I read said that there's a lot that they both pull from the same sources in general. Which makes it weird why there's so much struggle there, from our theological perspective. Now, when it comes to leadership perspective, that's a whole other thing. So I don't have a whole lot in here when it comes to the beliefs in Islam, but I wanted to cover the 5 pillars, which you did talk about, Matt, when you covered 5 pillars, and I don't have the words here in the original language, the transliteration, but anyway, it's these. Creed, right, which is know God, Allah, and Mohammed is his prophet. That's the creed. Pray 5 times a day, facing toward Mecca at specific times throughout the day. For a time, it was actually facing toward Jerusalem. And then that got changed back to Mecca. Give charity to the poor. And generally, the general rule is they usually give about 2.5%. It's the rule of thumb. Fasting during Ramadan, I think it's the 9th month of their calendar year. And then make a pilgrimage to Mecca. So if you want to be, good standing Muslim, these are the things that you do. Another belief is that Allah is absolute. He rules and governs every single detail of everything. Which, we say that too, right? God's in control of everything. There were a couple quotes I read that kind of bugged me. So I have here from the 2nd surah, the 3rd one. Fight them until there is no more fitnah, disbelief, that is, in worshiping of others along with Allah. And all and every kind of worship is for Allah alone. Now, do we have the same God? It's kind of a complicated question, isn't it? We do, but we don't. That's like asking, do we have the same God as Mormons? We would say there's one, and he rules all the things. So if someone's referencing God, it would be that one. From an Islamic perspective, yeah, so I think that would probably be a better thing, is they have the same God, but not understanding him the same way. So the filter is, in this case, through through Muhammad. Muhammad is given the revelation to reveal what it is that God, according to, or Allah, I should say, what Allah teaches through Islam. Now, the question would be, is Muhammad's revelation reliable? Which he got from Gabriel in a cave by himself, or other revelations along the way. How does that compare to, say, the New Testament? How many people wrote the New Testament or the Bible in general? Okay, so one difference between the texts is you have witnesses. Yeah, so Matt's saying that there's some similarities between Islam and Mormonism, and there is, when you get a special revelation on your own, and, we look at the New Testament, we say, you got Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, attesting to Jesus walking around on planet Earth, and when you look at the eyewitness testimony that they provide in the Gospels, it's very similar to what you would receive from eyewitness testimony today. This is put through the ringer. So you had, there was a detective who wrote a book, and he came at the Bible, and he was not a believer. He wrote this book called Cold Case Christianity. He was a cold case detective, and he would take eyewitness testimonies and put them together to try to figure out what happened with this cold case, like murder, what he dealt with. And by looking at it and reading the New Testament Gospels, he said, wait a minute, whoa. This is the way it would look reading the documents that I do on a police basis. You're not going to have everything perfect and the same in an eyewitness testimony. Where in some cases, Lord, help them be safe who are driving, help them to get to the people they need to. Yeah. You never want those sirens to come to you, right? Sorry. So you have one section where there's a paralytic that's brought to Jesus through the ceiling. I think it's Jesus' house. And in some cases, they tear up the roof. In other cases, they take off tile, right? In some cases, it's almost like they're taking dirt and clods and hay on top of all of that. They take it off and they're peeling off the roof. And in another case, they remove the tiles or something. That's the difference between Luke, the Greek, and Matthew. You have things that aren't like exact, said the same way in every respect, and that's what you get from human beings with different eyewitness testimony. So, not only that, like I mentioned, you have hostile witness to the accounts we have in the New Testament, where if something was said that was wrong, people would say that's wrong. They'd write it would be thrown away. It wouldn't last. Here. Yeah. Right, and there's a different emphasis. So Matthew is writing to one group. He's emphasizing certain details. And you're talking writing in the classical era, We don't have people that write like today, back then, where you want to give every single detail in perfect order. They didn't write like that. They didn't think like that. The Gospels aren't, this is the beginning, and you walk through, and this is the end. They're out of order in terms of timeline. And so the point is, each author is presenting, this is what happened, but I want you to see these details of what happened for a specific purpose. And so, when in Luke, at the Transfiguration, Jesus changes, right? And Peter, James, and John are there. And Jesus is talking to Elijah and to Moses about his exodus. That's the word used in Luke. No, that's not used in another text. So Luke is trying to connect Jesus to the people of Israel and their exodus, to show what Jesus is up to. It's a nuance. There's nuances to it. So, in this case, you have one person getting divine revelation without any other verification from anybody else. And it wasn't written down, yeah. So he, the assumption that he received it perfectly alone, and that it was delivered perfectly as well. Right, yeah. Well, in case of the Hadith, yeah. And so, it's tough. It's tough. Right. They don't believe in the Trinity. That's true. There's an expressed denial of the Trinity across pretty much every other religion. Yeah, and coming back to the idea of divine revelation, somebody receiving it, I'm trying to think of other religions that have more than one witness to God or an angel giving a revelation, or somebody receiving secret information. Buddhism, Buddha meditated and received it on his own. Mohammed on his own. Joseph Smith on his own. So when a preacher says, God has revealed to me, my red flags go up. Danger, like, no. Hebrews 11:1 says, in many and various ways, God spoke to his people of old by the prophets. And now in these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son. And how does he speak to us then today? Through the 66 books of the Bible. That's what we would say. This is God's divine revelation through human beings that had witnesses to these things that happened in the text. What was the excuse when the soldiers ran from the tomb, and what were they told to tell everybody? The reason why the body wasn't there. It was stolen. Well, what are they admitting? The body wasn't there. So, he's got a couple quotes which kind of bothered me. Oh yeah, we talked about that. Whoever seeks a religion, and now remember, this is a translation from the Arabic. I don't read Arabic. I tried to learn it at the seminary with one of the professors who was teaching it. Then he just stopped because I think he got too busy. But anyway, whoever seeks a religion other than Islam, it will never be accepted of him. And in the hereafter, he will be one of the losers. Now, there are texts in the Quran that bring up Jesus, that bring up Mary, the Virgin, that bring up the gospel. They call it the Injil. So it's really interesting to see those things. So you can see that Muhammad did have influences from the culture around him, Um, you say Joseph Smith did too. Um, there's a book on the similarities between Islam and uh, Mormonism by Dr. Alvin Schmidt, Chmidt. Alvin Schmidt wrote a book on the similarities between the two. And there's a funny take by Hans Feeney, Lutheran satire, on regifting a religion. Anyway, that's a different story. So, these things, scratch at me a little bit. Within Islam, you have sects, right? You have division. And this came about because when Muhammad died, he didn't have a son and he didn't name someone who would directly follow after him. So Islam split into Sunni and Shiite tribes after Muhammad died because of who would succeed Muhammad. But their differences were mainly political, less religious. Now it was who would implement the religion, right? But in terms of leadership, there was politics behind it. I mean, they're in charge of Mecca. They're in charge of the hub of religion for that area. So the Sunni Muslims, there's the big group. Sunni Muslims make about 85% of modern-day Muslims. 85%. And they believe leaders should be chosen from people who are capable to lead. Right? So they're chosen and elected in a way, if you want to put it that way, to lead. And then the Shiite Muslims, they make up the smaller percentage, the 10 to 15% Muslims today. They believe leadership should come from Muhammad's closest family. Many also believe that these religious leaders are chosen by Allah Himself. Yes, ma'am. Oh. No, it's supposed to be a capital A, so that's my fault. Yeah. Do I need a proofreader? Thank you, CPH proofreader. You know what? Yeah. Me too. So the Sunni and the Shiite Muslims, they are the things that were already in tension after Muhammad died. And the Shiite, they wanted Muhammad's nephew, Ali, I don't remember his last name. He wanted his nephew Ali to take over. So after Abu Bakr died, after 2 years after Muhammad died, there was one leader, he was assassinated. And I think there was two leaders after him, they were assassinated. And then Ali did take power for a little while, and he was assassinated. There's always been this trouble. So there's still struggles today between the Sunni and Shiite Muslims. There are. In Iraq, they want everyone to be Sunni or Shiite. The Sunni, yeah. The Sunni's the big one. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of fight and struggles there still within Islam. The Shiite in particular believe that there's this divine link between the leadership and God. I don't remember. I don't know. I don't know where the more extreme groups, which if they're Sunni or Shiite. My guess is there's probably some of both. Because it's more of the political power. Like, how are you going to implement what you believe within these countries or within the world? I mean, you have some Sunni countries that certain things are illegal that are okay in the States. And people are killed. Homosexuality you're killed for that in some countries. I knew a girl in high school. She was afraid to go back home. Dad lived in, I don't remember if she told me which country, but she was afraid to go home because she didn't think she'd ever get to leave. Her dad was saying, come home. Pretty terrifying place, especially for women to live in a country like that. It's not across the board. Not everybody that lives in the country is, looking to dominate and to rule. But it's kind of a difficult. It's got to be difficult, especially for women, because your rights are under your father or your husband. So when you have, there was a lady that was fighting for women's rights in the Middle East. She was recently taken to prison. I don't remember her name. This is very recent. It was the one lady who was shot and lived. She was given a Nobel Peace Prize. I remember that. It's still happening. So, 5 minutes. So to say that it's just Shiites that are more extreme, I don't think that is necessarily the case. I think it's just a matter of how they view Islam in the world, the way it should work and act and live. And if any religion treats other people as subhuman, even, atheism, then you're going to see people killing each other and giving themselves an excuse for doing so. I mean, communist China is mostly atheists. And what they're doing to the Muslims right now is terrible. Well, I don't know. That's a long answer, a way of saying I don't know. Any other questions? Got a few minutes. So talk about sharing Christ. These are in general, like how to share Christ with anyone, in a lot of cases. Ask questions. Don't tell people what you know or what you think you know. Ask questions. But tell me about what you believe. Tell me about how you get to heaven or paradise or whatever, nirvana. Tell me about it. Gather the information from the people. There was one lady when I was at this community college, and I was asking her, so how do you figure out the scale? And she said, well, when you do something bad, it's like losing a point, or I don't remember the word she used, but when you do something good, it's like getting 12. Getting 12 points. Hit the scale in your favor. Well, how do you know how many points you have? You got to follow the Hadith, right? And so maybe you can kind of go through the day and check off if you did all the right stuff. But what about the stuff that you forgot that you did wrong, or where your brain goes, on its own? I mean, you never know. So you ask questions. Okay, so what do you do? What is it like to be Muslim? Tell me about it. Do some reading. Do some homework. Find out. Find out what people believe historically. And then that also offers more questions. You can ask a Muslim, so how do you feel about, what's your background? Is it Sunni, Shiite? I know that there's some differences there. Tell me about that. And how does that impact you and your family line? Because being Muslim is also kind of like in Judaism. There's I don't want to say, what's the word? Not a spectrum, but it's part of your family. Say, I have a Christian family, right? What's the idea behind that? Is that they've always gone to church. It's like saying it's a Christian nation. You can't have a Christian nation. Not the way we live right now. it just doesn't exist. Because to say this is a Christian nation would mean everybody in this nation has to go to church. And that's not the way Christianity works. Now, it could be described as a lot of people in America go to church, so there's a lot of Christians here, so it's at large a nation of Christians. But there's some nuance there. So anyway, my point is, do some questions, do some reading, ask some questions, find out what they believe. Eventually you'll learn that their religion, and this is across the board, is about works. And this is true of some Christians will say, when you ask them about Christianity, it's about being good. It's about giving your heart to Jesus. Right? It's about living your all, living your best for Jesus. It's all backwards. See? There's a lot of Lutherans out there. A lot of Lutheran branches out there. Is Sunni and Shiite like Missouri Synod and Wisconsin Synod or something like that? I mean, we're trying to organize ideas into thoughts that we can comprehend and process. But I would say we just have to look at it completely differently because they don't operate within the same mindset. Yeah, in our case, it was for a theological reason. It's not because we want Matthew Harrison to be leader over the Wisconsin Synod. We don't want our synodical president who must lead the Wisconsin Synod or something. It's not about that. It's not about how the church politics is played out, and things like that. It's just different. It's apples and oranges, I think. That's my best answer. Anyway, ultimately, just develop relationships with people. Develop relationships. Now, they might cut you out. They might cut you off from communication. Hopefully not because we're badgering people, because they say, I just can't be around someone with your church background. We still continue to pray, and we say, I'm here for you if you need to keep talking. I know where I find true peace, reconciliation with God. Not based on how good I am, but because based on God's love. And so, if you ever want to hear more about that, let me know. Let's keep talking. All right, I hear children, so we got to pray. Dear Lord, we thank you that you continue to watch over us and provide for us. We ask that you would use us as your instruments, that you would use our vocal cords, our minds and our hearts, our hands and our feet, to share the love of Christ, those who are crushed by the law. Help us to be faithful witnesses of your word, your Son, not boasting in ourselves, not boasting in our works, but boasting in the work of Christ, who died for perfect people, for messed up people like us. Sustain us, keep us going in this world, until one day we will all rise, just as your Son did, everlasting life. Pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Bear in mind that things are way more nuanced. There's a lot of different groups within Islam as well. So Sunni, Shiite aren't the only divisions. There's even subdivisions within those groups. This is just a quick overview, very general.